yeah, I feel like I wasn't understood. Yeah, I felt very like, yeah, very misunderstood. Like I would cry really easily and I was very sensitive and people wouldn't like understand where my big emotions or big reactions came from. And I think that lack of understanding led to people like kind of like, what are you doing? Why are you reacting like that? When I needed people to turn in instead of turn away. And that, I think that definitely contributed to the feeling of aloneness. Hi, I'm Kelly. I am a late diagnosed ADHD woman, and now I'm an ADHD content creator and an ADHD coach focusing on supporting adults with ADHD.
Thank you. Okay, so let's kind of start at the beginning. Like, what were your first symptoms that you recognized? How old were you? What kind of happened that you thought maybe this was something, or even looking back, you now recognize as ADHD symptoms?
Yeah, so thinking about symptoms looking back, I didn't obviously recognize them until I was pursuing a diagnosis, but I oh my gosh, how far back do I go? Probably my first memory was being in preschool and being put in the timeout chair because I couldn't sit still during story time. um, I feel like I just have so many memories of childhood of like making little mistakes. Like I very impulsively one time in fifth grade science class, like, you know, did like something to an experiment that I was not supposed to. And then my teacher called out our group in front of the whole entire classroom to be like, this is the group that didn't follow the directions. And of course, it was my fault that we didn't follow the directions because, like, impulsivity, listening, not great with that. I was also such a daydreamer in school too. I remember when I was going through the diagnosing like process and like gathering information, I asked my mom, like what were some signs that you maybe saw of me in childhood that pointed to possibly having ADHD? And she said in third grade, she remembered my teacher told her that every day when I would go out to recess, I wouldn't go and play with the other kids right away. I would walk a couple of laps around the perimeter of the playground just to like, I don't know, like sort myself out and like regulate, decompress a little bit beforehand. Because I did find like the school classroom to be like very, very overwhelming. In high school, I had like high school and even college too, like had kind of a hard time with friendships. Actually, no, it was just my whole life. Like hard time with friendships, like often felt like I was on the outside, like I was more immature than all of my friends. Um, and like would go through groups of friends not quickly but like every few years it was kind of like I was sort of ousted from the group, and it was always sort of like I maybe handled something in the group like not the way that like most people my age would have handled it. Academically, definitely struggled up until like once I hit like third grade, it was like everything suddenly became really hard. And I think a lot of it had to do with reading. Like I couldn't attend to reading. All of high school, I actually only read one book, Brave New World. And all the other books I had to spark note every single book because I just like couldn't sit down to read it. I would try the audiobooks. I would be up so late at night trying to read and I just couldn't. Same for math homework. I think I had teachers who like took pity on me. Like they saw that I struggled. And even though I should have gotten, a 68 in the class, they passed me at a 70. So I know. I know a lot of when I did eventually get the diagnosis, the 6 months after that were like, I had never cried more in my life because I was grieving so much for like little Kelly who didn't understand herself and always felt different and, didn't get the help that she needed, didn't realize she needed help. And that was it was a really healing time to look back and sort of like be there for myself as an adult. Um, I really struggled with relationships growing up and even into young adulthood. And it was always this feeling of being behind. Like my friends were interested in things that like I wasn't yet interested in yet. They knew about things that like I didn't yet know about. Like I always felt like I was very naive, but it wasn't like I had a big brother and a big sister, and like I went to public school up until high school. And so it wasn't, I think, for lack of environment. I think it was more just like I was kind of like in my own world all the time. I was such a daydreamer. Like when I was daydreaming, a lot of it was like worry and rumination. I was very much like I was like a very anxious kid. Oh, but I didn't realize that I would have these like circular thoughts that I would spin in, and I would like hyper analyze friendship relationships. Did I say the right thing, or like what are they doing? How should I be acting to be a little bit more like them? And it was a lot of masking growing up, just trying to fit in, and then ultimately reading the room wrong and showing up in a way that wasn't always accepted by the other kids. Yeah, I guess feeling like an outsider. Oh my gosh, I'm feeling sensitive today because I just came from like therapy right before this. So I'm like, already had my cry in for the day. Um, oh my gosh, it always felt like I was just like missing something. Like I would be with the group, with the people, but then like some joke would happen or like people would kind of like split off and I would be like, well, where do I go? What do I do now? Like, if you're ever in class and they say like find a partner, I was always just standing there like panicked, like nobody's going to choose me. And I often feel like people normally didn't, because I think I was kind of like a little bit known as like, yeah, like Kelly doesn't really listen. Kelly's like very impulsive. Um, yeah, just I think too, probably if you asked my friends who've like known me for a long time, I'm sure a lot of them wouldn't say like Kelly was an outsider growing up, but it felt like that in my experience. I didn't ever really feel understood. I felt like I was like sad at my core. Yeah, I felt very like yeah, very misunderstood. Like I would cry really easily and I was very sensitive and people wouldn't like understand where my big emotions or big reactions came from. And I think that lack of understanding led to people like kind of like, what are you doing? Why are you reacting like that? When I needed people to turn in instead of turn away. And that I think that definitely contributed to the feeling of aloneness. I would always just say like when I was younger, I would always just say like, oh, it's just because I'm weird. I'm just sensitive. Like I'm such a weirdo. And honestly, up until like adulthood, like I would make jokes. I'd be on like in my mid 20s, like on dates, like oh like I'm just kind of weird. And it was just a joke in my family and among my friends, like just quirky. Not understanding that these like set of traits like were actually kind of a constellation of things that are really common for neurodivergent people.
Right, absolutely. So when did ADHD start to come into the conversation, or what was your like process in getting there?
Yeah. So, okay. So I'm gonna kind of like take it back to college. I guess like later high school. Like later high school for me, I experienced like so much just anxiety. Like I remember like having panic attacks in my car before school, and like I couldn't understand. I didn't understand then what was wrong. It was just like this doom feeling. And then it kind of carried into college for a couple of years. And then I think one of the things that really helped me in college was being accepted into a sorority and like meeting other people who were kind of like outgoing and also just who seemed to, I felt really accepted in college for the first time. And, but I still like had this pervasive like anxiety, depression that I struggled with even among like those like happy times. And after I graduated college, I was like, other people don't feel like this. Like other people don't just like have panic attacks and like feel sad all the time. So I decided to go start going to therapy because a friend of mine had mentioned that she had a therapist, and that hearing that from someone I was close with really empowered me to feel like it was an okay thing to do. There wasn't something wrong with me to be seeking a therapist. And in therapy, it helped so much with my anxiety. I went from when I was like to this one specific therapist for about like 7 years, starting from when I was like 23. And she did so much work with me. She was amazing. But there was this like feeling of like just hitting my head against this wall all along. Like, like setting routines or like managing my emotions, like emotional regulation type things. Like I couldn't do certain things the way that I felt like other people could. Everything just like felt like I was just like, why do I keep on like having a hard time with these certain things? Honestly, as far back as probably high school, I was worried that I had like early onset Alzheimer's or something like that because I had such notable memory issues. So that's a big one for me. Yeah, I felt like I was so worried. I was because I do so much for my health, and because it feels like it's frustrating. Memory problems are frustrating for people around you because they're like, why didn't you remember that we had these plans or that my birthday was coming up or whatever? Other people perceive you forgetting things often as like you not caring. And so I actually took that on myself. I believed for a long time that like I didn't care about people or the things that they told me. But then it was so conflicted because I was like, yes, like I know I'm a very caring and empathetic person. And then when I realized it wasn't me not caring, it was like literally in memory issues, it took a lot of the shame and guilt off of me. So yeah, and it's hard because even now, like, there are moments when I have, like, the memory stuff comes up, and it's frustrating for, like, my husband who's like, "I told you that, like, 3 times." And I'm like, "I know it's frustrating for you, but, like and I am really sorry, but also, like, I'm the one who has to freaking live in this brain." And, like, that's really hard too. Mm. When did the shame start? When did the shame start? Oh my gosh. I don't even think I could pinpoint a moment. I don't know. We can blame bad memory for that, but I think I just feel like all along I had always, anytime anything went wrong, I just always assumed it was my fault, like in a relationship or in a situation that involved other people. Something goes wrong, I'm like, I just am automatically like, it's me, I'm the problem. And, whether that was true or not, I think it was because of so much in my youth growing up and like being the person who forgot things, being the person who was impulsive, being the person who blurted something inappropriate out, or being the person who like wasn't paying attention. It just like it was me so many times that I just assumed it was me every time going forward. Yeah. Yeah. And people expect you to show up in a certain way, and you you live in a society with expectations, but you have a brain that doesn't really fit those expectations. So you're bound to not feel like you fit in. And I also think like just I guess I'm jumping ahead here a little bit, but that's why it's so important for people with ADHD to understand their needs and the way that they work best so that they can sort of like create an ecosystem to live in that really works for their brains. So they're not just like, stuck in some corporate job that expects them to do things that they're not great at.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay,
Mhm.
so let's move to the diagnosis. Yeah, and like kind of what led up to that.
Yeah. So it took, I think, 3 months for me to get the appointment. I got a full neuropsychological evaluation. And in the 3 months up to that, it was like I was seeing myself in a new light for the first time. I I started taking notes, and in the end I had like 8 pages of notes, but I was taking notes on all of the research I was doing about ADHD and the symptoms that I found were common. And then I would just like live my daily life and then add these like little anecdotal stories of like, oh my gosh, I did this when X and I did this thing when Y. Because so many of the symptoms, when I read them, I was like, that doesn't apply to me. And then like 3 days later, I'd be doing the exact thing that was mentioned in like the article that this was talking about the symptom. And I'd realize, oh my gosh, I am. I learned later in coaching training that people with ADHD are like very poor predictors of their own behaviors and like they tend to be not good at recognizing the patterns of their own behaviors well. And that does come down to the fact that we struggle with memory and also like we're very present to what's going on in our own heads, which means that sometimes we miss like the patterns in our behavior. And that was so true for me. I didn't realize it until I started like taking notes and almost treating myself like a little science experiment to observe. So by the time it was time for the appointment, I had 8 pages of notes that I walked in the door with. I was super anxious because I was like, there's no way I don't have this, but also I think I'm full of crap. Like, I must be making this up for attention. Which I also learned was like kind of a common experience for people going through the diagnosis process. But yeah, I found out later that what the diagnosis process was essentially like an IQ test. And as I was like doing every single test, I was thinking like, am I trying to get this, to show that I have ADHD, or am I taking this authentically? I was in like meta cognition of like every single thing that I was doing because I knew I was like under a microscope. So it was really hard to even like almost trust the result. But in the end, I feel like the biggest thing probably was the conversation that I had with the psychologist who gave me the diagnosis, and even like answering the questions. There was like a 500 questionnaire, and so I had my doubts, but I was also sure. And I sat down with her at the end, and she confirmed that I had ADHD. She also confirmed I had generalized anxiety disorder, which like, duh. I'd been diagnosed with that in the past. um, and from there, it was like, I feel like my whole life just changed from that moment. It was a lot of relief. There was also, when I got the diagnosis, I felt a lot of relief. Like thank God. Like now, it feels like now I can go forward instead of wondering what the heck is going on with me. Um, it also felt like, am I still making this up for attention? And then it also felt like, where do I go from here? This simultaneously changes everything and nothing. I am still me. I'm still in this body. I still have this brain. Nothing, everything is the same. But now my understanding of myself is totally different.
Wow. Well, to rewind a little bit, did you start any treatment for anything for ADHD?
Yeah, I did at that same time, like almost within like a month or two. I within like a month or two of my diagnosis, I started to seek medication. It took me a month or two to come around to that idea because I'm kind of a crunchy person. Like I really believe that like, get your sleep in line, you get outside, exercise, are you eating whole foods? Like that stuff is a foundation to good health, and meditation too. I also am a meditator, and I realized that like I'm doing all the things and I am still struggling. And so that's when I decided, for me, it felt okay to try medication. And the first time I tried medication, I cried because I was like, oh my God, my mind is quiet. Like, is this what other people experience? I felt like I finally had the choice to do things that I previously like couldn't get myself to start on. For example, like I took it on a day when like I knew I had to clean my house. And normally I would sit around all day and just be anxious about the fact that I had to clean my house, but like I couldn't get myself to start. And when I took the Ritalin, it was like, your brain is quiet. Why don't you go empty the dishwasher? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to go empty the dishwasher. And it was like this peace and ease that came with it. That was amazing. Um, yeah, it took a while to find the right medication. And I found that like my medication needs evolved based on like my work setting, how I was feeling, also like where I was at in my cycle. And so it took me probably, I think, 9 months to find like a combination of medication that worked well for me. I've got like three options in my like medication toolbox. Strattera, which is the generic name for that is atomoxetine, and that's a non-stimulant. I take a really small amount of that, like 10 milligrams, and it's long acting and it doesn't really take effect like the first day. It takes like a few days to build up in your system. But for me, what that does is it takes my like normal ups and downs where like I feel like I'm hyper productive and then I'm like in the pits. And also just like euphoria and then like sort of like a mini depression, which to some people they might be like, Kelly, are you bipolar? I got evaluated for that. I'm not. It's really common for ADHD people to like, have the comorbidity of bipolar disorder, but also like for ADHD to kind of look like that, like up and down that bipolar can have. But the Strattera really just like kind of makes the waves a bit gentler for me. The other thing that I have is Ritalin. So I've got like an 8 hour Ritalin and I've got a like a 4 hour one. Ritalin is methylphenidate, and that is a stimulant. And that for me is like you can take it and like you feel it within 30 minutes. So if I have like a project that I have to start on and I really need to like get it done today, but I'm having a hard time getting motivated, I have that in my toolbox to just take. The other thing that I find, in addition to like motivation and focus, that the Strattera or that the Ritalin really helps with, is also just like tolerance to environmental stimuli. When I was a teacher, it was like fluorescent lights, kids chattering all the time, like uncomfortable work clothes that I had to wear, and like being like thirsty or hungry or whatever, and like not being able to like leave while I have a class. And the Ritalin made it so I could like tolerate that a lot better. Because otherwise, I'm a very sensitive human being.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that makes sense. Do you have any side effects that you've experienced from any of the medications?
Yeah, the Strattera only in the beginning would I experience like a skin crawly feeling, and because it's a Strattera is a norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor, which is like basically it kind of puts like a little bit of fight or flight mode on you. And so I noticed it most like in the beginning few days of adjusting to it, like I get the skin crawly feeling of, like when you kind of like the hairs on the back of your neck stand up as if like you should be alert of something that's going on around you. It's like that. But also when I was exercising, I was doing CrossFit at the time when I started that. And my heart rate would get up so high because of like it's adding that like norepinephrine into your system. So that was a big piece of it too. With the Ritalin, the symptoms that I was feeling that I feel the most are if it kind of burns me out. So because it makes me more productive, I like am doing a lot and I don't really have like an off switch. So then I find at the end of the day when it wears off, I'm like, I'm donezo. And then often the next day too, there's almost like a little bit of like a hangover, like you did a lot yesterday, so you need to rest today, is what it feels like my body is saying to me when I take Ritalin. With the side effects, like I think a couple of things. Like if I'm taking the Ritalin, I usually go into it knowing like, hey, you're gonna crash out tonight. Tomorrow's probably gonna be a slower day. So like I keep that in mind and I kind of plan ahead for it. The other thing that I do try to do is just like actively reminding myself to slow down. So if I'm noticed, like I'm trying not to sit at the computer for like 4 hours, hyper focusing on a task. I'm trying to like maybe set an alarm. So then I go and like eat. Cause also you don't really get very hungry on stimulants. Or like go and take a walk or just like moving around the house, try to move a little bit more slowly instead of like, even though my body wants to go fast. There are certain supplements that help with it. And like for different people, they work different amounts, but I do find that supplement stasis helps a bit with it too. Yeah, Stasis. Otherwise, though, I actually see a functional doctor and she's helped me a lot. And one of the biggest helpers for me for managing my ADHD were L-theanine. I just take like there's a dropper. The brand I use is Mary Ruth's, but like a dropper bottle. And like anytime I feel like I've just got like this really like repetitive thoughts or like my brain's just moving really fast and I can't chill out, I'll take 2 dropperfuls of that. And it like within 10 minutes, it calms me a good bit. And then same, I'll take magnesium every night, magnesium glycinate. It really helps me to like calm down at night because most people with ADHD have like some sort of sleep related challenges.
Wow, interesting.
Mhm.
That's cool.
Yeah,
Um,
it's like a little hack.
yeah. Yeah. So, what else have you found effective, like for yourself or for your clients or whatever, in managing like the practical stuff that you help coach your clients through, or for yourself? Like, what has actually helped? I know you mentioned seeing or adjusting your diet and exercise and all of that. Is there anything else that you've seen that's like really made a difference?
Yeah. A big thing that I use a lot is like ramping up like a dopamine ramp. So, for example, if I really have to get myself to like tidy up the house, but I'm like sitting there scrolling on my phone, avoiding getting started, then instead of thinking of it as like you have to clean the whole house, which feels very overwhelming, I think of it as you don't have to clean the whole house. You just have to straighten up the pillows on the couch. So, like breaking it down into really bite sized chunks kind of like lessens the overwhelm for that ADHD brain. And also like ramping up to doing the thing. So instead of if I have to like go in and check my emails and I have like 100 emails from vacation and it feels scary, I'm not going to just dive in and check my emails. I don't have enough dopamine to do that. I will never start if I think of it like that. But I will start if I think of it like, okay, we're going to make a cup of coffee. We're going to put on some real pants. We're going to sit in front of the computer and we're just going to delete the spam. So like I'm ramping up by doing the like coffee, that felt good, have some coffee, real pants, like wow, now I'm a real adult. Sit down in front of the computer, delete the spam, like I did the easy part first. So you're just ramping up. That's a big I think that's a pretty big ADHD like skill to understand like how to get yourself to do things.
Wow. Yeah, that would be huge. I mean, maybe to close out, if you just want to kind of talk about like your words of advice, words of wisdom for women that are possibly wondering if they have ADHD or are just really struggling. Like, what advice do you have for them?
Mm. Yeah. Okay. Okay, one piece of advice that I would have is that after you get diagnosed, it's really common for people to find that their symptoms worsen for a period of time. And this is super, super normal. It's also super, super frustrating because you're seeing yourself through this lens and seeing all of the challenges that come with it and understanding that they're related to ADHD. Um, Allow yourself to feel the frustration, allow yourself to feel the grief, and also understand that this is a really powerful time of information gathering. And it's your opportunity to understand yourself in a new way. And then you can take all the information that you learned about yourself and you can use it to move forward. So, if, for example, you start to learn that, like, wow, emotional dysregulation for me is really tied to ADHD, I'm quick to anger or quick to cry, that is something to walk into a therapist's office with, or to walk into speak with a coach with, or to do your own research online and figure out, like, how do I deal with this now in terms of ADHD, since I understand the root cause of it.